Welcome back to Beyond the Billboard. I'm here with my trusty co-host, Greg Wise, and we are joined by an excellent marketer, Chantal Rapport, the CMO and EVP of Growth for Upstart. I think I got your whole title right, but we're thrilled to have you here and we're thrilled to talk marketing. Chantal, can you give listeners a little bit of background about yourself and your company?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So as you mentioned, nailed the title, Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Growth at Upstart. And Upstart is a leading AI marketplace that connects borrowers with lenders. And we are on a mission to unlock smarter and better access to credit for everyone, from home lending to personal loans to car loans. We believe that people are more than just a credit score, and we use over 1,500 variables in our underwriting, which makes our underwriting very different. But also, we have a lot of speed in our process. We're one of the fastest credit products on the market, and generally excited to continue to expand access to credit, which is bit of the foundation of the US economy and unlocks kind of this American dream we always talk about. So that's a little bit about what we do. And as CMO there, I've been there for quite some time. We are in charge of everything brand, marketing, performance, creative, but also growth product. And we can talk about that as well, why I think that intersection is important, but oversee everything to do with consumer growth from acquisition and retention.
Thank you. A lot to get into that you just covered what you do, a lot of similarities to what we do at OneScreen in terms of the different data sources and even talking to different end users and different ICPs. So a lot to dig into there, but you brought up brand several times. We talked a little bit before about some like maybe thoughts about brand that, every marketer's got their opinion about it, but like your opinion, what like commonly held belief about brand. What's something that you totally disagree with that some marketers might raise their eyebrows at?
Yeah, I am, what I would call a non-traditional marketer. I did not start my career in marketing and kind of ended up here, to be honest. And I've told that story, multiple times. But I think that gives me a unique perspective as a marketer, certainly a more analytical one. And as a what I would call an outsider from a creative and traditional brand perspective, my beliefs may differ. And the biggest one that I found over time is just that brand and performance are not two different things. They're interrelated. They're impossible to break free from one another. And then also this idea that marketing owns brand, right? We all have brand teams. I might build a brand team. I might have brand marketing as a team. But the idea that the marketing org or that the CMO owns brand, I can't comprehend, because I believe that brand is just such a culmination of touch points throughout the entire product experience that it's just as much what we put in our marketing as it is how our customer service agents pick up the phone, as it is how our CEO talks to the public. It's the experience in the app, it's the forget password flows, it's all of these pieces that make a brand. And so I think often, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when we think about brand marketing, we only really talk about this like one small aspect of brand marketing rather than everything that collectively adds to brand. So in my mind, maybe if I were to summarize, it's like the company is brand and brand is performance. That is like my connection, and that these are not separate things that for one or two people to own.
The
I think we
company
agree with
is
you on that because,
yeah.
well, Greg, I mean, we both want to jump in because we had one of our first episodes was about internal marketing. And I think what you just talked about was the brand team inside the marketing team. They're the external marketers, but you have to do internal marketing too, to the CEO, to your product team, to think about, like you said, everyone's email signature, how they pick up the phone. How have you gone about
Mm.
the internal marketing, and especially as that your perception of what brand is, how have you helped others across the organization who probably maybe have come from orgs who think, no, that's marketing's job, or they've got a team that handles that. Like, how have you handled that internally to get everyone on board with your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant process, and I think a lot of it is education and understanding. We just had this conversation internally recently, talking about our brand house and building brand foundations, and was kind of talking about how we need to explain this to some key stakeholders and how it's needed for creative to and brand to do what we need to do. And the rightful pushback was like, this is for the company. This isn't for what creative needs to do. Like, this is needs to be core to what we all believe. And so I think those little moments of continuing to push why it matters and how it's connected is important. And so just the constant education of everyone needs to care about this is critical. And I think reflecting on the brands that we learn to admire and understanding why we admire them. So like, one of my, well, hesitant to call them favorite, but I will for the sake of this, is like one of my favorite brands I'd say is Starbucks. And if I think about why I love the Starbucks brand is actually consistency. And because I just think they've done consistency epically well and their retention is, really, really through the roof and their loyalty is very strong. But the reason their loyalty is strong and their brand is a worldwide, recognized brand is not because of brand campaign. I don't actually know how many, if any, Starbucks brand campaigns are out there. It is because of the consistency in their product. It's the experience with the barista, it's the products, it's the feeling you have when you buy it, and that you know you can walk into any store and receive the same coffee, good or bad. Not actually a coffee drinker or snob, so won't embark in that debate. But it's the experiences that add up to what you think of with a brand. Now, there's always counterexamples. People might argue that Nike was created really based off of a brand campaign. Their product supports that, but I think a lot of people who think about their favorite brands, the things they tell you when they ask why is that your favorite brand, are often this like the actual experience they have with the product that might be supported unconsciously from an end user by these like brand campaigns that were incepting them with these ideas to feel certain ways. But ultimately it's really this collection. It's not ever, but not often a single brand campaign that we feel very strongly about, maybe with the exception of like the Budweisers of the world and these sorts of companies who do put a lot of effort in long standing brand campaigns.
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is a lot of these, call them maybe legacy brands. They've been around for a while, the Coke and Pepsis of the world, and even the Starbucks of the world. They started with brand in mind, to your point. So let me ask you this, for the marketers out there, the performance oriented marketers that for the past decade have been playing with the dollar in, $2 out sort of performance playbook, if you will, right? Digital only playbook. Every dollar into the machine has to be accounted for on the way out. All marketing channels have to be measurable. Everything's got to be attributable. The CFO is breathing down their neck, etc. How would you advise those marketers who are now thinking about brand to initiate that conversation internally with their team?
Yeah, I, I think maybe one important point before I get into the details of like how to navigate that conversation, which we could certainly talk about, is still this idea of brand. Like even in how you ask the question, Greg, it's like brand is still separated from performance. It's like, okay, I
Yeah.
used to do performance, but now I want to do brand, and this idea that there's separation there. And if we think about back to like Mad Men era and the epitome of marketing and what I think a lot of people today would call brand marketing, like why does marketing exist, right?
Hmm.
Why does it exist at all? Why was the industry of advertising created? It is to sell product. It's to promote business results. Like none of these things, no one just woke up one day and said, I want to do a brand campaign to make people feel warm and fuzzy today. Like they want to make people feel warm and fuzzy about their products so that they convert and sell more. So we may have gotten better of attribution and measurement along the way, but the intention of all marketing has always been to advertise to someone to make them convert into an action. And so I think that's where this idea of like brand and performance being one, not my term, but I've heard it elsewhere, this idea of like brand formance, this like connection between the two of them makes so much intuitive sense to me, because the timeline on the results might be different, but ultimately you're still tracking for business results. So there is like shouldn't be a difference in the ultimate goal of a brand marketer and a performance marketer. I think their timeline and their leading indicators of how they're developing performance for the business might be slightly different. But ultimately, if you're running any campaign, you should know how it impacts the business. And the tech and our ability to track people digitally has enabled us to just do that much better and at a kind of bigger and faster scale. And so I think when we think then about your question of like how do you convince a CFO or someone to invest in what we would maybe call more traditional brand marketing, I would say to like break that idea that brand marketing is this thing where you're just spending money without any impact on results. I would expand the ROI into maybe a longer term time frame and understand, okay, what is my leading indicator that this is going to work? How much money am I going to spend? What is ultimately the return on this investment that I think the company will have over a 3, 6, 9, 12-month period? And that might not be on one campaign. It might be on a combination of campaigns and explaining that impact. But ultimately, I think the way you decide to invest in that isn't that much different than what you're doing in your in-month campaign. And that's something that any CFO, CEO can understand, just like we make investments in product, all day long with a similar time horizon. We don't expect to invest in 100 engineers and have a feature built and have that ROI be within our 30-day look back window, right? We build that for the long term, but you can be certain that there's still an ROI on that engineering hiring, and there's a belief there in a business case. And I think some of these long-term investments in marketing, whether that's MarTech, honestly, or brand, these things that have what we'll call just like longer payback
Mhm.
periods,
Mhm.
are really viewed the same. And so to me, it is just like rationalizing a business case and remembering the point of why we are, why we're in this business ultimately. And maybe I'm a little bit more like capitalist than the average person, but like that kind of is the job of marketing. And I think remembering that and having a CFO and CEO who understands that is important.
Yeah.
Do you think the scrutiny on marketers is just more, your example there was great about like, product has an
Oh, that
investment
was
with maybe,
phenomenal. Yeah.
like that's a great analogy, but I wonder if, and I think marketers will maybe say this, but do you think there's more scrutiny or just visibility on the function of marketing, partially because it is visible, it's to some degree a tangible product that everyone can see and everyone has an opinion about? And also, do you think that to some degree what Greg was just talking about, that ability to track certain channels at a very granular level has maybe skewed opinions to think, well, yeah, like you said, at the end of the day, we should all care about revenue as a marketer, but some of those channels can get to that, can give visibility to that quicker. And maybe there's two questions there, but yeah, I guess I'm curious your thoughts on those two parts.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that you are right that we have trained ourselves to want this immediate return and immediate ROI, so that we bucket these longer term things as something completely different. And I do think there's a lot more scrutiny on marketers. It's more visible and we have the data available, right? Like
Mm.
in the same way that we, back in the Mad Men era might have just assumed that these things are working and driving sales. Sales are up, great, we're all happy. Sales are down, marketer gets fired, right? Like that's kind of what happens. But now we actually have a lot more data, both for the good and for the bad. Like we can track when sales are down. Is it related to marketing or not? Often, it might not be. And in old days, that might have just been something's wrong with the product, but the marketers are blamed for not selling it fast enough. Now we have a lot more data, like how many people are you bringing into your flow? Where are they leaving? What are they buying? Right? We're tracking everything to be more data driven and make better data decisions. And sometimes that can be a double-edged sword in the fact that we're just used to it. And just like like everything, we want instant satisfaction and we want to know the numbers, we want to know it now, and it's available for so much that it's hard to invest in something long term. Like it takes a lot of discipline, I think, to do things and spend money on things that are 6 to 12 months. We get caught in this trap all the time. It's really hard to spend time on things that have longer term payoffs when you could be spending your time on something that is shorter term. And the most finite resource we all have is time, right? That is like the most valuable resource of our lives, of the business. Like it's not money, it's not any of the other things, it's time, because I can make money, I can't make time. And so I think having the discipline to spend time on something long term and have conviction for a long period of time and let all these other fast things go by you is difficult, but kind of necessary in order to break through that ceiling. And we've also seen a lot of brands succeed, honestly, with just being quick and iterative. So it's not to say that that won't work. I mean, we did that for a really long time, which is also an interesting thing about just like modern
Mhm.
consumerism, and brands are building in very different ways. Like we still see some of these legacy brands, like you mentioned, Greg, but we also see a lot of brands that are built overnight in a very like interesting D2C, throwing the whole marketing playbook out the window and like just meeting with the brand. There's 100% influencers and absolutely crushing it and just like letting their influencers craft their message and narrative and story. And it's just like that would never have been possible, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. So we're really just like shifting and rethinking the way that we interact with companies in general.
Oh, consumer behavior in general, I think you make an excellent point there. I think that's part of what a lot of marketers are coming to realize, that are coming out of that sort of performance era. Not that performance is going to go away, but like, how do consumers actually buy? Whether you're a D2C brand or a B2B brand, is put yourself in the position of your ICP, your customer. And people now are preferring something a little bit more tangible, a little bit
Yeah.
different. To be literal, right? We do out of home advertising. And, what we're seeing is sort of this the point of diminishing returns, where companies have, these sort of digital first companies, digital only companies that are sort of hitting a wall.
Hmm.
And they're seeing that some of the digital ads are not working as well. CAC is up, LTV is down. They don't necessarily think out of home. They don't even really necessarily know brand. It's new. These are the marketers for the past 10 years that, again, have like $1 into the machine, $2 out. They know they need to do brand, right? They don't know where to start. They know out of home is part of it. That is a fundamental shift from being like this, what marketing has become, sort of this finance gig, to being a well rounded marketer. You understand both. But there's a lot of marketers out there with these new emerging brands that don't necessarily have that mindset yet. And for example, for us, out of home is part of that story, right?
Hmm.
Brand means so much more, and you beautifully sort of talk through what that means. But I think we're really at an inflection point. And I think going forward, you're going to start hearing these new emerging brands, companies, I'll say, start with thinking about brand. That was never the case 15 years ago. And again, that's coming from a guy who spent a lot of time at HubSpot selling against things like brand, things like billboards. And now we're sort of coming to see it, come full circle. So I think it's an interesting time out there. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of folks are feeling the pain.
I think there's a lot in kind of what you said about people being willing to invest in new marketing kind of formats and
Mhm.
consumers' desire for something that's new and wanting to understand companies more. I certainly think we're seeing that generationally, but also things are just moving so fast. We're bombarded with digital ads at all times. And I think we're seeing that real consumer fatigue and wanting kind of new fresh ways to interact with brands and having that be more IRL marketing. And I think those things are important. I think we're all trying to figure out like how to make that work because again we've been kind of on the like instant satisfaction train for a really long time, so getting off of that is not easy, but there are ways to do it. There are smart companies like OneScreen working on this problem, and I think it's a really exciting time to try to infuse this idea of virtual, digital, and also where we are every day and experiential and having a connection with users that breaks through all of the noise of the 10,000 things I see every day. So I think it's a very interesting time to be a marketer, honestly.
You've hinted at the Mad Men era a couple times, and there was 4 channels maybe that they could advertise on, but now there's 50 maybe. And I think what we try to solve is, an audience is spending time away from their phone. If that's driving to work, if that is taking their kids somewhere, even if it's that subconscious brand exposure, there's recall, and they will and it. We all know that the numbers are going up in terms of total impressions someone needs to see before they would take action. But back to a point I think you both made earlier is we're inundated with information now. So somebody who's making a decision doesn't have to search very far to do their own research. And so they're probably already coming into a decision, especially as you're getting up market in B2B or the higher price point decisions you're trying to make or a product you're considering. They've already done their homework. And so, the ones that they trust a brand and they've seen the brand and they know it, and it's that like that ancillary feeling that they have around like, oh, I've seen these individuals, they feel trustworthy, they sound smart, they're educating me. Like that's what we see stands out for some of these brands that, yeah, there's just the fatigue of too much. And when they are ready to buy, what we can help do is supplement that, all that digital. We're not replacing it, we're supplementing the digital marketing with the exposure in, the other 8 to 12, 15 hours a day that they're not in front of a screen or on their phone. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I think there is a huge shift there.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think, one thing we haven't touched on yet is just where the future is going in terms of AI search and where
Mhm.
people are spending their time. So, I think the content is absolutely blowing up with AI generated content, and people are moving, or my hypothesis is will move away from traditional search channels and clicking through normal ads. They still trust influencers. I think that will still continue to be a huge online channel, even though it may evolve into like the types of influencers every different generation looks to. But certainly the way we search and do research, and for us, we have we're a lending, so we have a high consideration product, a lot of research that goes into that. You don't just take a loan on a whim. And my guess is more and more people will be moving that to ChatGPTs of the world or to Gemini. They'll be looking up these things and they'll be getting instant responses, which then again limits my ability to advertise in traditional ways with the user, because I might be kind of cut out in controlling that journey. I mean, there are other ways to control the AI journey, but I think those things will shift again. But what won't shift is, hopefully we're not in the next 30 years all living in some VR bubble. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to, use AI to enable hopefully a better quality of life, which means more time in real life, more time outside, in the car, in the park, these sorts of things, and having those then connections that are smart and impactful and make you think are the ones that you'll really remember. Like the most of the campaigns, one of my favorite campaigns of all time, and they're often like PSAs, so they're easier to remember. But are billboards, and they're really billboards that like stop and have made me really think, and like that I remember, and I can like vividly remember looking at it, and I can't say that I've ever felt that way about any other ad. I think it's just because the sheer quantity, honestly, that you see out there. Like every year we talk about the Super Bowl ad, there's always some great ones, but can I really recall them? Like, not really. But there's like something when a billboard is just done really, really right, and you're just like standing in front of it, that it's pretty impactful.
We were talking to a marketer today, and the topic was about measurement, and they brought up one of the ways that they measure their out of home campaigns is the number of texts that they get after that their friends or colleagues or prospects even see a billboard and text them like, wow, I saw it, like that was really cool, or just it's a moment, it stands out in real life that, yeah, you remember those, and you remember that, you remember Times Square, walking out there the first time, and you're just inundated with lights and like all the different brands. So I think that it's one of those moments that we hear a lot about when done well, especially with the creative abilities that people have to keep it simple and to stand out. That's an added benefit of out of home, I guess.
I think I think creativity is back. I think it's back, and I think we're going to be an explosion of what it means to be creative. And by the way, I think customers reward companies for being creative. And I think that that is going to help brands stand out. D2C, B2B, it doesn't matter. I think that that is now the future. I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see brands maybe pushing the envelope, being a little bit more bold and thinking a little bit more outside the box, kind of going back to those Mad Men days, if you will, right? Where
Hmm.
Charlie, you and I have talked about this, which is when I took my marketing courses in college, it wasn't about refreshing dashboards, and it was about coming up with a big campaign, a big idea, literally the big idea, studying how the Aflac duck came to be, and the group of creative directors sitting around the table and trying to come up with that campaign and the slogan. I think we're going to
Hmm.
see that make a big comeback, and that's going to present itself, by the way, not just in out of home, great, but it's going to present itself across all of those brand sort of components, Chantal, that you mentioned. So I'm excited for that because I've seen sort of this all come full circle, and I'm excited to get back to that creative component. I think we all are. And I'm a consumer. So I think, I think it'll be great.
Yeah, I think seeing the kind of traditional creativity come back a little bit more, and brands really caring about their consumer and the relationship they have with consumers again is very exciting. Plus all of the data that we now have, and we can be a lot
Yes.
smarter about how we do these things is such like an interesting intersection. And all the marketing tools are about to already have, but are about to blow up even more with the use of generative AI and all of these new tools, and some of that being creative tools where we can bring things to life so much faster and so much easier. So I think it's a really exciting time to see what users are doing, or what consumers are doing, and how we connect with them best, and balance. And I think the role of the CMO, like we've touched on, is just ultimately shifting, and every company will always decide to treat this differently. But I do think this is like a common topic amongst marketers, is like, what is the role of the marketer? More and more marketers own a P&L. Do the marketers own brand? All of these things are really being talked about, which is just an exciting time to figure out what it means for everyone.
Exciting indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of questions. We covered a lot. Probably some other ones that we could go on and on for hours about. But Chantal, this was great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Great insight. We love your opinions about brand, obviously, and thanks for educating everyone. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me. Soon I'll say on X, and I'll have a great X profile, but not today. We're still stuck in the LinkedIn stages.
All right, that's where most marketers are. So thank you again thanks for joining us. Great answers, and we
Yeah.
appreciate it. Until the next episode, for Greg and myself, thanks for joining Beyond the Billboard, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.